Hey guys, Tony Rowe here, back with another Lead Chess Rapid game. It's been a while. I apologize for that. My fiance is in town and she is studying for the USMLE Step 1 exam, and she pretty much just studies all the time, and I mostly give her silence because I feel like I should be a good boy and not be the one that's responsible for her failing or, some nonsense like that. So, really. So yeah, I haven't been recording is what I'm saying. I trailed off there because I was shocked by this move. So one typical idea here would be to go b3 immediately. And the point is that b5, a4, a6 is not possible yet because there's a pin along the a file. So b3, b5, a4, a6. A takes b5 would pick up the b5 pawn, and his position would totally fall apart. So if I go b3 and he has to take, I'd be very happy to take back with the a pawn, and so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try and exploit the fact that he played c4 so early, and so now I've traded off my a pawn for his c pawn, which I feel like is a pretty good trade. I could go c4 right away. c4 right away. Bishop g4, knight e5 maybe. D takes c4, b takes c4, bishop g4, or any of the shenanigans. I think that should be good for me. I'm going to guess he's just going to go e6. But I'd be happy if he went e6 because he'd be blocking in this bishop. He doesn't have to go e6. He can go bishop. Okay. I have a feeling this might be one of the games where I'm just not going to be able to predict any of my opponent's moves. He's already played c4, and then now he took on c4, so I simply give up. It's one of those positions where I feel like maybe if I find the most principled move, he's going to be in a lot of trouble, but maybe not. I can just castle, and I think I'm very comfortable. Yeah, let's castle. I could go knight c3, but then he gets maybe a more purposeful development of his bishop with bishop b4, so I'm going to wait for bishop e7 and then maybe go knight c3. It's very clear that I should be shooting for d5 in this position, so it's just a matter of, I think, preparing it in the most optimal way. So he wants to go bishop b4 anyway. Not sure I blame him. This plan is pretty annoying. At least he gets to try and be irritating a little bit. I'm not... Maybe queen b3 here is good. Knight a3 into knight c2. Nah. It's also possible to go knight e5, which is kind of funny. Knight e5, knight takes e5, queen a4 check. And if he goes back to c6, which protects the bishop, then bishop takes c6, b takes c6, queen takes b4. Knight e5. I kind of am tempted by that move. It's the most vigorous, I think, option. I'm trying to play this opening really energetically because I feel like my opponent has been a little bit over ambitious, or maybe made some moves that don't make a lot of sense. Not your most typical reverse Grünfeld. I'm just not certain. He can't take because then check, and but maybe, so if I go knight e5, he takes queen a5, a4 check, bishop d7, queen takes b4, knight c2. Probably just queen b2, knight a1, queen a1 is good for white, I would guess. What else is there? Queen b3 is just safe. Knight e5. I don't think d5 does anything yet. Something like bishop a3, knight a3 is also pretty logical. Maybe in that case I can look for c5 and then knight c4 to d6. Knight e5. Knight e5, knight e5, queen e4, queen a4, knight c6, bishop c6, b takes c6, queen b4, queen d4. Hitting my rook. Somehow I don't feel like that should be a big deal, though. Maybe just knight c3 and rook fd1. Black can't castle is the big issue. Well, let's try it. Let's give it a whirl. There's a local player around here who passed away. He was kind of an amazing guy. He was one of the he works at the same place that I worked at. He worked at the same place that I work at now. Well, I just quit, but that I that I used to work at, or I'm still okay. That's not relevant. But he was one of the pioneers of the incandescent light bulb, and also of like a very strong chess player. He was maybe 2400-ish, and a pretty well-known composer, not of music, of chess problems as well. His name was Milan Vukcevic, and he said if you invest a long time on a move, you must play it. Just because to waste the time to investigate anything else, if you've already spent a huge chunk of time investigating one move, is almost always a bad idea. I'm not sure I agree. It's just sort of a funny anecdote. But the one thing I like about this move is that I feel like it's sort of a logical exploitation of him putting the bishop on b4, and if you notice in this position, sort of a consequence of him moving the c and d pawns is that he's got a lot of weak dark squares and this weak diagonal, and if I could nab this bishop for this knight, which is essentially what I'm doing, I can really gain a foothold on these dark squares. So that move I didn't think was possible because of this. When it looks like he's losing material. So if knight takes c6, bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, queen a4, threatening here and here. Queen d4 seems pretty gutsy. Can also just nab the bishop. I like a good bishop. So if knight d7, queen d7, d5, ed, cd, knight e5. Not sure. Maybe there's knight c6, bishop takes c6, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, queen a4, queen d4, queen takes c6, king e7. He has to go to e7 or else he hangs a rook with check. Queen b7 check, hitting the bishop again. And also keeping an eye on the rook. So what would he do there? It's possible for him to go queen d... No, if he goes queen d7, then I can take. So what if I take here? All of that seems pretty good. What if I take here and he goes here, and then I go here? He's got c5 in that case. It's also possible for me to just go c5 and try and trap this bishop. Or knight d3, bishop e7. e4, maybe? Knight d3. I don't think he can just let me take this thing. So he'd probably go to e7 to keep it safe. And then e4. Ah, no, my d-pawn's hanging. Idiot. Maybe knight d3, bishop e7, d5. This is a common problem with my games, is that I get, I think, a really long time in positions that are like very good for me, and I end up just getting in a lot of trouble this way. See, I'm already, it's move, I have to make my 11th move, and I've used half my time. Somehow this doesn't seem as clear after queen a4. I'm not sure I love that as much. Knight d3, bishop e7. Maybe I can just go bishop b2 and then e4. I want to just play e4 with my center intact and just run him over, but if I do this, it's kind of just, all right, I'm going to do this. This is kind of an admission that my idea is a little bit maybe flawed. Like if I can't take on c6, or I could have taken on d7. Taking on d7 was probably a good move too. But it looks like after bishop b2 next move, it's going to be hard for him to stop e4. And then I think I'm just clearly better. So this is a kind of a low-risk way to play. Maybe I'll find out that diving in on c6 or taking, and then d5 was better. Probably something more forcing was a little bit better, but this seems good enough for an edge. A pretty serious edge, I think, after just bishop b2, e4, e5, I guess. I meant to play e4, but e4, e5 is probably the plan. I love putting knights on d3. It's actually one of my favorite squares for a knight. Like in a lot of these fianchetto structures, it's a popular maneuver to go knight e1 to d3. It controls a lot of good squares usually, and it opens up the fianchettoed bishop. Okay, this position just looks very good. e5 and f4 and d5 are all kind of looming, and I'm sort of just threatening to blow them off the board here. I feel like I'm almost even close to winning this bishop on e7, which is like, how the hell is that humanly possible? But like d5, let's say he moves the knight, I don't know, knight b8 or some nonsense, and then I just go e5, hit this knight. Let's say he moves the knight, knight to e8 again, d6. He must go bishop g5 to save the piece, but then f4 traps the bishop, so it's kind of funny. Hope everyone's having a good week. I am taking it pretty easy. I'm switching jobs, and I'll have a month off. And during that month, I'm hoping to do something big again with my channel, like Reddit opening of the week style videos again, where I do, you know, like the larger number of h6 is like, it's impossible that that's the best move. It's just like a do nothing move. I don't understand. So if I go e5, oh, is knight h7 his idea? He doesn't want to go to e8. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to go e5. I think d5, d6 is close to winning. So if d5, knight b4, d6, knight takes d3, queen d3, bishop g5, f4, traps the bishop. Yeah, I mean, come on. This is crushing. This is like the triumph of the flank openings. This is what every flank openings person wants. You trade off your flank pawns for their center pawns, and then you smack them over the head with your center pawns. I love pawn rollers. It's one of my favorite things ever. It's one of the reasons why I really like piece for pawn sacrifices, because a lot of times you get these pawns and they take up massive amounts of space, and it's just kind of fun. So yeah, I want to do something big again for my channel now that I'll have a little bit more free time in the month off that I'm taking before I start my new job. So I was thinking about doing some kind of like an opening series, like a repertoire for black. Making a repertoire for white is pretty ambitious. That's a lot of ground to cover. But I was thinking about doing a repertoire for black, maybe in like the Leningrad Dutch. The nice thing about the Dutch is that you can also play it against the flank openings. I was also thinking about doing a repertoire for black in the triangle, but the triangle is really fun, and I think it's a cool opening, but it also has a lot of move order issues. Like d4, d5, knight f3. And if you want to enter the triangle, you can't play knight f6 because c4, like e6 is a queen's gambit, and c4, c6 is a Slav. So you need to like go d4, d5, knight f3, and play e6 or c6, but neither of those moves are really like optimal moves versus 2 knight f3. And yeah, I mean, against knight f3 on move 1 and c4 on move 1, I think the triangle presents some problems. So move order wise, okay, all I have to do is really make sure I'm winning that bishop. So probably any queen move is good. Let's just take this. And maybe just queen e3. Unpinning the pawn so I can take it. Yeah, f4. I might leave the bishop there for a hot second, unless he moves the queen and gives himself d8 to retreat the bishop. I might leave it there and just go knight d2 to e4, or knight c3 to e4, and kind of rub it in. There is the logic that I'd rather have the knight on e4 when I take here, so when he goes knight e4, I can trade off that knight before I can do kinds of, you know, some annoying things to my king. Doesn't really matter that much, but oh, you son of a gun, you. No. No. Should have played queen d4. You idiot. What a scalawag. All right, maybe I can go bishop a3 and still... Oh. After bishop d8, he's threatening bishop b6, winning my queen. What a jerk. This guy is rude. I'm really irritated at myself for this. What a moron. Ugh. So if I take, he takes on b2, I go knight c3. Takes on b2, knight c3. I don't know. He can even just take. Unbelievable. I totally missed queen b8. Well, all right. That's okay. My position is still pretty overwhelming. These pawns, somewhat better than these pawns. My piece is somewhat better than the bishop on d8 and the knight on h7. So when he goes bishop d8, I'm probably just going to go knight d2 and either play knight c4 or knight e4. And yeah. That's dirty. So that's a miss. That's a miss by me, for sure. I feel fairly dumb. But yeah, so I was thinking a repertoire for Black and the Leningrad Dutch, and it would be like a series of maybe, 10 videos or 8 or 9 videos, however many videos it takes me to cover it. So let me know what you think of that in the comments. If you have any requests, I don't guarantee that I will cater to them, but I will hear them out. Bishop c5, perhaps? Maybe just knight c4. Or knight e4. e6, queen d6, bishop c5 looks good at first, but he has bishop b6. More scum tactics. So if knight c4, something like queen b5, I think I can just go rook ac1. I just want to push e6 is really my goal here. e6 will effectively end the game, so I prefer if his pawn was still on f6 so he doesn't get f6 for a piece, but he's too smart for that. I guess he's going bishop g5. I'm making this a lot harder than it should be, that's for sure. A7's hanging. I could take that at some point if I want to. Bishop g5, I'll probably just go queen e4, hit c6. I can also think about rook takes f8 in between, and if queen takes f8, then I can go queen b3, which I can't do now. Queen b3, of course, is maybe just slightly annoying because of this. Okay, so he's taking first. That's kind of surprising. Giving up the f-file. Because I don't really have any concrete threats toward his king, but I don't feel like that's what you want to do. There are only so many ways I can lose this game. One would be to get my queen pinned to my king here by accident. Another would allow some kind of like queen on b7, pawn to c5, long diagonal trick where like knight g5, knight h3 mates me or something. That would be a humorous way to go out. But e6 seems pretty terminal. I mean, even e6, like knight f6 or e6, bishop e6, delays the inevitable for like a move or two, but these things are going the distance, I feel like. So I just have to not fall for some kind of shenanigans, and I think this game is over. So bishop g5. I'm going to go queen e4. That stops one way to lose. This does allow e6, knight f6, which hits my queen, but maybe even in that case I can just play bishop takes f6. Like if it was my turn, e6, knight f6, bishop f6, even rook f6 there. G takes f6, queen g6 check, like wins this and this pawn probably with check. And probably even mates him. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a mate by force there somehow. Two pawns on the 6th, they're fairly good attacking pieces. I also want to do some kind of a special giveaway on my channel. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet. I think I was originally intending to do it at like 1,000 subscribers, but I'm so damn far away from 1,000 subscribers that it doesn't seem reasonable to punish everyone who's watched my videos thus far by making them wait. Okay. What about h4? kicking the bishop back to d8, and then maybe e6. That looks pretty good. I'm going to do that. This also takes away a square from his knight as well. So just gaining a little bit more space before I drop the hammer with this thing. Yeah, I saw this move, but he self-traps the bishop, which I'm not sure he saw, or maybe he just didn't care. What's he doing after queen f5? Yes, you did exploit a pin for one move. I'm not sure it was in your best interests. You can go g6, but I'll probably just play queen d3. And this thing is still trapped. This is ugly. Sometimes it's hard for me to resist calculating things like g6, h takes g5, g takes f5, g takes f6, trying to go for the trifecta, like the Tony Rowe Immortal game. But it's just, yeah. That's the way you lose games. c5. The desperation move. So if I just take here, takes, he's just dead, right? Yeah, okay. What am I thinking about here? Wasting all kinds of time calculating when I think this is just a blowout. I could move the bishop and he would also be in very large amounts of trouble, but it's just simply not necessary at this point. I'm just shredding. I'm winning a piece and I'm shredding his king side at the same time, so. Juantonio. I said that in an Italian accent. Of course, Juan is a Mexican name. f7 is a pretty huge threat, so I think this is pretty much forced. For g takes f6, do I want to go e6 immediately or just take with the queen? There's also queen g4 check and taking on f6 with the rook. It's not the worst idea I've ever seen. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I hope you guys can't hear the rain. My AC busted in my apartment. And it's starting to get hot in Cleveland, finally. Okay. f7, king h8 is f8, f7, king f8, e6. I could do the Tony Rowe Immortal mate with e7. That looks pretty fun. Let's do that. That's a flashy way to win a game. That's really what we're all about here, isn't it? Oh, you can take my queen. And then go g6. I don't care. That's fine. Go for it. Come on, this is pretty sweet, right? Are you not entertained? g6 is forced. I think I'm just going to go e7 anyway. King g7, f8. That, yeah, that's made in something. Maiden, yeah, okay, he resigns. So let's take a look at that one. I think black was in a lot of trouble right out of the opening, essentially. So Yeah, reverse Grünfeld. I actually don't think this is incredibly dangerous for white or anything. You notice it actually entering like the reverse exchange Grünfeld scores like really well for white. But something like 65% or is that 65%? 68%. But I actually I think that this position is very tenable for black. Every time I play this position, it's normally a quick victory for white. I think practically speaking, not a lot of black players are happy to go into this or feel comfortable here in a tempo down exchange Grunfeld, but I actually don't think it's really that great objectively for white. One example of this is the blitz match between Bartholomew and Gustafsson. Jan played this line as black and got perfectly acceptable positions. I think it's worth considering. There's also just e6, c4, and then knight f6, which enters a, Tarrasch, but there's also castles d takes c4, which is kind of a big branch. Then there's a lot of fun lines, queen a4. Knight a5 is possible, knight e5 rather is possible, which is an interesting idea. I think the line goes bishop d7. Bishop d7. Yeah. Ah, yes, and then knight a3. Knight a3, c takes d4, knight takes c4, and white's down a pawn, but I think white has pretty reasonable compensation for it. This bishop's a beast. There's a lot of pressure on black's queen side, etc. It's hard for him to keep this d4 pawn anyway, so. But I don't think like this position objectively white has anything particularly serious, and the same honestly in this position. This position's a little bit trickier I think for black, but even so I don't think white has much here. I think this is one of the flaws actually with the 2g3 move order is that you allow black to go c5 in this case. I think if you're looking objectively at the opening, the flaw with knight f3 compared to 1d4 is that black is allowed to go c5. So when you go d4, c5 is not particularly good because of d5, but after one knight f3, black is allowed to go c5. And normally white goes c4 in this position to stop d5, so and going into a symmetrical English. But when you go g3, you also allow black to go c5, bishop g2, knight c6, when black has a pretty solid share of the center. That's partially what white wants. He wants to play some kind of reverse flank opening, reverse King's Indian with d3 or reverse Grunfeld with d4, but I don't think black has really anything to worry about here. Yeah. Okay, so our game, I think c4 is just not a good move. It's only been played twice. b3 was played once. Knight c3, interesting. Just looking for a quick e4. That makes some sense. If knight c3, knight f6, is knight e5 the idea, or what? This looks good for white. Yeah, I mean, even b3 might come here if I wouldn't be shocked. But I think b3 right away is a pretty straightforward way to get a solid advantage. Yeah, I'm just not optimistic about black's chances already. Trading the c-pawn for the a-pawn is a pretty big concession. And now there's going to be pressure on black to... yeah, I think e6 is almost forced because d takes c4 is pretty ugly. Something like bishop g4 is possible, but I'd be worried about knight e5. When I'm just threatening to take, and e4 would discover an attack on the knight and win this pawn in the center. And if e6, yeah, I mean, I think just taking here is good enough for something, even here. Really? Oh, because this business. Wow, that's surprising. So what if e3 instead? Ah, check. So I really do have to castle. But this should be good too. I mean, white has the two bishops and more center pawns and pressure on the center. Really smooth development. Maybe bishop a3, knight c3, or knight c3, bishop f4, bishop g5. Yeah, it's pretty unpleasant. Maybe bishop f5 is a little bit better if you want to develop the light squared bishop. Then perhaps just castles. e6. But if I let him go e6, then... yeah, maybe this. And then here. I lose an exchange. This is tricky. It's trickier than I thought. Takes here, knight e5. Threatening e4. I get it. Okay, well. Yeah, I mean, 2 exchanges away from the center ended up really costing black. I mean, you can see that I have a very large central majority at this point, and it's like a banco where I have the center and I haven't given up a pawn. Like, I have these open files to pressure his queen side, and this open diagonal, except I haven't really had to do anything for it. It's just like already a crushing advantage. Bishop a3 the computer wants. And if takes... rook takes, really? No, knight takes makes a lot more sense, come on. If castles... I was thinking about c5 here, yeah. With the idea of entombing the knight on d6. This looks bad. I mean, you do give up the d5 square, which is kind of a bummer, but after knight c4, I mean... this thing's going to be a monster, and there's nothing really black can do about it. And e4, something like e4, knight e5, or knight d2 and e3, just real solid. Queen b3, rook f to b1, like banco style. This looks like banco on steroids, like a, you know, banco and then you hit the nitrous oxide or something. Bishop d7. So I thought about a bunch of stuff. Wow, computer actually likes knight d3. So maybe that means this kind of business isn't that good. I was worried about this. Queen a4, c5. And yeah, I have to go back to b3, and maybe after, like, well, a5 is no good because it hangs an exchange, but yeah, I mean, this is still good, I guess. But everything is probably good. Computer wants to go here, but I thought this was very clearly terrible for black if this pawn hangs for nothing. Yeah. So probably just everything was good. I wonder if this was good too. I thought about this. The only thing I didn't like about this was that the knight I thought could go to e5. I did, well, I mean, this is a thing. Yeah, but this is overwhelming too. e4, f4 is coming, and again, this central pawn roller is like is pretty gross. So knight d3. Yeah, I mean anything. Like now the computer thinks bishop b2 is overwhelming. Like I've looked at like 19 moves that are winning here. It's just really ugly, this position. Oh, no, I played bishop b2. Wow, e4 I thought just hung a pawn, and it's possible. So if takes, e5, knight g8. He doesn't get time to castle if he takes the knight on d4. He has to put this thing back. Okay, I take on b7, I take on a7 maybe at some point, and that's funny. A move that I thought was a blunder is also very good. Okay, but just going e4, e5 here is there's just nothing black can do at this point. And yeah, h6 is just like a non-move. This looks like the Morphy version of like a Reti game. You know, like Reti would play the way I played in this flank style, but like every single one of Morphy's opponents in like these famous games just rolled over and played all kinds of like nonsense, like, you know, h6 or like giving up the center, and then they just got rolled up. This is like the weird love child of those two. Yeah, I mean, even here, like, you know, the rest of this game is like, I keep saying like, is just barely worth talking about, honestly, because it's just, this position is completely overwhelming. I did bungle something though. Takes, queen e3, bishop g5, f4, queen b8. Yeah, so it thinks I just need to move the bishop and suck it up like I did, and I'm still winning. But I should go, after this, I should protect the bishop. Like bishop d4 unpins, that's a really good idea. Queen d2, queen e2, queen c2, anything that protects the bishop. Or yeah, I should just move the bishop and block the pin that way. The way I played was quite dumb. Still overwhelming. I mean, there's nothing black can really do. Like, this thing's terrible, this thing's terrible. These things are awesome. This knight is about to become a total boss on one of these squares, so But rook f to b1, stopping, getting him away from looking at this thing. If something like queen c8, then e6, and he can't take on d6 anymore, and he's just, these things finally triumph. Yeah, so that move was pretty strong. Wow, double question mark? That is harshly chess. Oh, you guys don't know about this yet. Don't tell anyone. These small annotations are part of a much larger feature that's being added to Lichess very soon. You guys get a sneak peek. You'll get to check that out soon. Actually, maybe I can give you another hint after this game ends. Yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? H4 question mark? Come on. Now you're just being harsh. I mean, how can you label any question mark to a move that's going to lead to this position? It's like, and anything after this is just completely irrelevant. Okay, but oh, queen g8. Yeah, that would have been sweet. I'm sure like 87 of you were screaming queen h7 at me, the screen. I played e6 instead. But that's all right. Yeah, and black resigned here. I mean, what else is there to say, really? Don't give up the center. And just in general, one takeaway is it's usually incorrect in a lot of these scenarios to give up the tension in the center for like nothing. So it's really part of black's entire central strategy here is to use this c-pawn to obtain some kind of extra control by trading for white's d-pawn. And by going c4, you completely miss the threat. I mean, it just, positionally, it doesn't make any sense to play c4. And then you know, b3, you give up the center even worse over and over again, and you see what happens. Like, this is a very good example of what happens when you neglect the center. You 10 moves later are having the center pawn shoved down your throat. It's very similar to, I mean, there are tons of examples of this in chess, but you know, maybe like the, let's see, how does this go? Like this line in the Nimzo Indian, like this, it's correct nowadays to go knight takes d5. E takes d5 is experiencing a little bit of a renaissance. This move has been sort of tarnished by a couple of like really crushing games from white, but it's not as bad as, like, you can see Carlsen played it in the World Championship versus Anand in 2013. It's not as bad as people make it out to be, but black has to be precise to not get in a lot of trouble. But you can see here, like, a move like c4 has been played, but it doesn't score that great for black, and usually it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a little bit more acceptable here because it stops the very natural bishop d3, but in general, a move like c4, let's say here, is just really bad. Because after bishop c2, the play is very one-sided in the center. So when black has removed this tension, just as he did in our game, the only thing that's really left as far as central play goes is white's build up towards e4. And black, now that c takes d4 isn't possible, makes it really easy for white to build up towards this. If the pawn were still on c5, e4 is a little bit more risky because d4 is still kind of loose. Like e4, cd, cd, and d4 starts looking a little weak. But when you relieve the tension like that, you get into a lot of trouble. And there are similar examples in like the Coley system, I think, is another famous example, like some nonsense like this. After e6, bishop d3, a lot of beginner players play c4 or something like knight c6, castles, bishop d6, knight b to d2, and then at some point they go c4, castles, whatever, queen e2, c4, and after bishop c2, again, play is like a little bit one-sided. In this case, e5 happens to be good, but in general, like removing the tension in the center usually is not a particularly great idea for one person and the other. That's another topic I want to make a video out of. I think this is a pretty good example of that. I want to make a video about tension in chess because I think it's something that maybe like your average 1500, 1600, 1700, 1800 doesn't understand that well, but the best players understand perfectly. Like the point behind why you want to leave the tension and how to do so successfully, how to get used to leaving the tension, and sort of understanding tension in chess. And there's a lot of different kinds of tension. In this case, there's tension between these two pawns. It's really the interplay between two pieces, usually having to do with like both pieces being able to capture each other. You see a lot of tension in like open files in chess. Both rooks occupy the open files, and there's tension because if either person exchanges, they give up the open file, for instance. So that's something I want to cover, and I think this game is a good illustration of Black relieving the tension in the center over and over again to his disadvantage, and really suffering for it. So I will certainly be back with more content. I'll have to figure out a way to record with my fiance here within the next month because she's going to be here in town for quite a while, probably until early June. So, but you can expect the frequency of videos to, I think, increase a little bit to a couple of videos a week instead of maybe the one or two that I've been pumping out over the last couple of weeks just because of personal stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate all the support. I really appreciate all the comments you guys leave. I love hearing from all you guys. I love all my regular viewers. Shout out to you guys. Okay, bye.